Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our upgraded commander build video on the Tier 9 Italian battleship, the Lepanto. And also a quick note, I do plan to live stream on Twitch this evening, 8 p.m. Central European Summertime, CEST, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're watching the video today, maybe I catch you this evening. So, Lepanto, Italian battleship. Well, let's talk about some things regarding the ship. But first off, we want to talk about what type of battleship is Lepanto. Is she a long-range sniper, a close-range brawler, or a mid-range battleship? And I would very much tell you that I believe Lepanto is a mid-range battleship. One is her artillery range is not the best, especially for tier 9 if you're seeing tier 10s and super ships. 18.1 kilometers. Granted, you do have an access with the spotter plane. It's going to give you some additional range for brief times. But it's pretty poor, among the poorest of tier 9 battleships. The second thing is with her concealment. Once you've built for max concealment, 13.4 kilometers. So you can get decently close and be able to go dark. When I say that I believe Lepanto is a mid-range battleship, it's mainly due to her guns. They have 1.6 Sigma with OK horizontal and vertical shell dispersion, but Sigma is pretty bad. So you're gonna have, if you play this as long range, you're gonna hate it because your shots are gonna be very inconsistent, even though you have 12 381 millimeter guns. But mid-range, I would say from the 10 to 15 kilometers is the best range to play Lepanto, because you're really targeting heavy cruisers, light cruisers, battle cruisers with these 381 millimeter SAP guns. Close range, she's just not so maneuverable. You don't have any torpedoes. You know, kind of like you don't have the trump cards like the Venezia or the Napoli, you know, that have torpedoes, or DC for that matter. Because she's a battleship and has just the high explosive secondaries, which are wildly inaccurate. So she's not meant to brawl at close range. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But mid-range battleship, that's the Friday or the Saturday highlight I had. I'll link that video at the end of this battle. Now, in terms of her armor scheme, we do need to talk about that. So you have 32 millimeter on the fore-end plating, and then you also have the 32 millimeter on the aft-end plating. So a few interesting little different things going on with the armor. So you have an icebreaker of 60 millimeter, which turns into the 80 millimeter. Then we go to the back. You have a little small patch of 200 millimeter here for, you know, as an example, kiting away. But one of the things that's not so great is you kind of have this step up. So you can actually trigger shells or arm shells that go through and pin in. So she's not the best at kiting. Also because her kiting angle is pretty poor. It'd be something like this, I think, to get the forward guns off. So you really do have to pay attention in how you utilize the armor. Now, in talking about the midsection of the ship, you see 32 millimeter decking that turns into 55 millimeter. So that helps you be a little bit more tanky in dealing with some more of the HE spam in the game. Granted, you do have a longer superstructure, but it's not this huge bulking superstructure. It's not something like Georgia as an example. But yeah, 55 millimeter, so that will help you out. It goes to 70 millimeter on the top, which goes into your casemate armor belt of 350 millimeter, and then torpedo protection 38 millimeter. So I don't know if it's still accurate, but when I read the WoW's wiki, it said that the Lepanto had the second best torpedo belt protection in the game, behind Musashi at tier 9. But whether or not that's still accurate, I'm not entirely sure as the game has progressed and new ships have been added into the game. Now, in terms of our armor scheme on the main guns, so it's a little boxy, right? So you have 406 millimeter on the front. You have this kind of slight slant angle, not too much. It's not something that's more angled forward where you're just more likely to bounce shells up. So 406 on the front, 254 on the sides, to 380 on the back, and 200 on top. So of course, you know, the top of the turret is the weakest, and then the side. So you just have to be mindful. So one of the upgrades I take it to help keep my guns in action because if not, it's painful because your guns are possible to be knocked out. So let's go ahead and start looking at the modules first. So with the build we have right now, our reload time is 32.6 seconds. I think the reload time was what, like 37 seconds if you don't have the main battery reload in the 6th slot. I think, just kind of saying off the top of my head. So she has a pretty long reload time, right? We have not grease the gears. We have expert loader on Sansonetti here. So our minimum shell type switching time is 9.1 seconds. Helpful, especially when you have a battleship that's going from angled to broadside. Then often I'll switch between the SAP to AP, or if he's angled away, then I switch back from the AP to the SAP in the midst of a reload. 180-degree turn time, 28.7 seconds. So that's with grease the gears on our commander, not the main battery modification in slot 3. SAP shell damage 12,500. Maximum AP shell damage 12,000. So if you get full pins out of your SAP, they actually will do more damage than your AP. So it's a bit interesting. Just want to notate that. In terms of the hull, you do get an upgrade from hull A to hull B. Hull A is going to take you 72,100. Hull B 75,900. So it's not a huge hit point increase, but it's something nonetheless. You also have a better buff to your AA defense, which it's nothing to write about on AA on this ship at all. Maneuverability improves as well. As you can see, basically our ratings go up to 80, and then maneuverability 39, survivability 94. So modest health hit point pull for a tier 9 battleship in World of Warships. You also have upgrades to your gunfire control system. So stock, your range is 16.5. That's really rough. Still, I'm going to tell you to go for the hull B first if you're grinding the ship currently or about to. Go for the hull first, then go for the gunfire control system. So you have a spotter plane at least in the meantime to help you out. But once you are able to upgrade, you go up to 18.1 kilometers. So definitely needed. So as soon as you can grind through both of these modules, you're going to want to do that. Propulsion, 160,000 horsepower. So without Sierra Mike flag, 29.5 knots. With 31 knots. Probably 31 something. Now going on to the upgrades. So the first slot, I've taken the main Armament modification 1. This is reducing the risk of your main battery becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. Main battery survivability plus 50%. Main battery repair time, negative 20%. This just, all in all, is, I think it's the best for your first slot. I'm just looking to see, we have a 16.5 second action time on our damage control party. The other thing you could think about, if you wanted to extend your action time of your damage control party to help you a little bit with your taking this, you could boost the action time. But I don't really recommend, because I don't, unless you really love Italian battleships, Lepanto is probably one you're not going to be playing very much. You're probably going to play Colombo more than Lepanto. I don't see myself playing Lepanto very much now that I have Colombo and I finished the grind. But regardless, this you get to see here what this does. And I've had the turrets knocked out sometimes, not permanent knocked out, just need to repair them. So with that slightly boxy design on the turrets, I do think main armors modification 1 is the best to go for. Magazine modification 1, which reduces the risk of your ship's magazine detonating by negative 70%. You wouldn't take that because if you're playing ranked randoms, clan battles, you'd take Juliet Charlie, and you wouldn't take Lepanto in the clan battle at tier 9. Just saying. You have also auxiliary armaments modification 1, but this is for secondary and AA, not, which both of these things on Lepanto suck. So even if you build into it, a turd is still a turd. No matter how much you polish it, it's still a turd when it comes to secondary and AA on Lepanto. Second slot, damage control system modification 1. This is reduce your risk of catching fire by negative 5%, risk of flooding negative 3%. I've maybe once have had my engine and steering gears knocked out. It's not as common on a battleship as compared to a cruiser, especially a destroyer. So reduce the risk of the fire, reduce the risk of the flooding, and helping build into your survivability and slight tankiness. For this third slot, there's two things. Well, actually I say two things. There's three things you could go for, okay? First is, because of that 1.6 sigma, I'll put it on the side of the screen here, I have gone for aiming systems modification 1 because it reduces the maximum main battery shell dispersion by -7%. So I'm getting tighter vertical dispersion, and I'm getting tighter horizontal dispersion. And in my opinion, you really need that. And that's why this ship plays best at mid-range. You know, long range, it's just going to suck. You're going to miss most of your shells, even though you have 12 of them. So having the aiming systems for that greater accuracy really helps. Also, we took grease to gears on Sansonetti, helping us with our main battery traverse speed, which is 28.7 seconds. And on the Battleship, I really like 30 and under. So I'm okay with it because when you're playing the mid-range, you have time to get your turrets turned around, right? And you have a 32-second reload time anyhow, at least with the build that I have. So I know I could fully get those. I'd have a 180-degree turn time, and still then some before my guns had fully reloaded if I need to switch my turrets their direction. But you would improve it by plus 15%. So it'd probably get you down, I'm just saying this off the top of my head, you'd be closer to 26 seconds, maybe close to 25 something. But around 26 is probably where you'd be pretty close at. The third option is also the smoke generator modification 1. So this is something that Wargaming just did new as of this update, adding the smoke generator modifications to Italian ships. I couldn't get this beforehand. So the consumable action time is plus 20%. So right now, our exhaust smoke generator is 45 seconds. I can take X-ray Papa, 1 signal, increases the action time, so now it's 49.5 seconds. And then we could increase that by a further 20%. So I'll just do the math on my phone here real quick. So we could add 9.9 seconds onto this. So then we have almost a whole minute of smoke. So that basically means you could get almost two reloads off, unless you have adrenaline rush really cooking for you. If your smoke fire penalty doesn't catch you out, which is pretty abysmal on this line. Typically, the smoke generators, when you're using them, it's to disengage, or if you need to go broadside to move back, or you want to sneak in closer to the enemy team. So that is an option you can take here on Lepanto. I wouldn't recommend it because I don't know many people who play Lepanto out of love. Probably something more considered on Colombo if you like playing more the tier 10. But we'll talk about Colombo soon because I have the ship now. So for me, I like aiming systems modification 1 the most to help make up that accuracy that's not so hot on this line. Much better than the Veneto. I didn't even bother making a video on Veneto because I just hated the ship. My joke with Veneto was I would just nickname the ship 1 of 9, meaning 1 of 9 guns will hit your target every salvo. Fourth slot, damage control system modification 2. This is going to reduce your fire extinguishing time, or I guess I should say improve it. Put the fires out and put the floods out sooner by -15%. So this is very helpful because there are times when you're playing this mid-range, you will get focused down. So being able to put the fire or flood out that much sooner, and then using your exhaust smoke generator if it's ready to disengage. So this is the clear winner here for me. And I don't really bother or concern myself with these others because cruiser or destroyers is more you'd see these two on, and then airstrike modification 1, that's just for your depth charges, which it's very difficult to hit a sub with depth charges unless he's actually spotted and you're not just trying to drop the splash pings you see on the surface of the water. Fifth slot, to concealment system modification 1 is the clear winner. Lepanto begins to shine that much more when you have a full concealed build between the 5th slot and your commander having concealment. I would highly say that because I didn't have concealment expert on my commander until I put Sansonetti to try to finish work on grinding him up to 21-point commander, and it made the ship feel that much more comfortable playing and having that 13-4 concealment. Otherwise you're close to 15 if you're missing concealment on the 5th slot or on the commander. Also reduces your detectability range by air, you see 10.4, and dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ships plus 5%, meaning they have slightly worse dispersion when firing at your ship. Yes. 5th slot, there's 6th slot, excuse me. Only 2 options to really consider here. I have gone the main battery modification 3 to add the main battery reload time 12% reduction, though I am taking a nerf on my main battery traverse speed. And this is very helpful because otherwise you're sitting at like a 37-second reload, or maybe it's 36 seconds, something like that. And it's just really not that fun, because then you're thinking you're really close to Minnesota's 40-second reload time. But at least with Minnesota, the guns are accurate. They are accurate. Where Lepanto, they're not accurate. They're just, if you get lucky, yes. And you get better luck when you play this as a mid-range 10 to 15 kilometer mid-range battleship. You play this battleship 16, 17, 18 kilometers and out. Like if you were really running the range, you're just gonna struggle landing salvos and landing shots on the enemy ships you're firing at. So it's really not worth building into the range. Only when, let's say, I've cleared up a flank, or I'm having to kite away from a flank, does spotter plane come in handy. Otherwise, you want to play this as a mid-range battleship. It's not a long-range battleship. There's no tier 9, other tier 9 battleships that I've played. I can certainly tell you, by all the ones I've played thus far, this is not a long-range battleship. It's a mid-range battleship. So that's why I'm really going to press here on the main battery modification 3 for you to take that, and not take gunfire control system modification 2. This ship is just not enjoyable if you play it long range. Okay. Auxiliary armaments modification 2. This is for AA and secondaries. Nah, it's not a secondary. It's not a battleship by any stretch of the imagination. So for me, this is the clear winner for the 6th slot. Now, moving on to armament. So let's talk a little bit more about the guns. So these are 381mm guns. So you have SAP and AP as your main battery options. You have high explosive as your secondaries. So if you set any fires, it's only going to happen by your secondaries if they manage to land on the targets of which they're firing at, because your secondary guys, gunnery men, are cross-eyed. So if they hit something, consider yourself lucky. So reload time, because of the 6th slot, 32.6 seconds. Shell type switching time, 9.1. These guns do have good velocity, and they will reach your target relatively quickly. So that's really all I can say. With these, the SAP, when you're firing on battleships, not battle cruisers like Schlieffen line and the St. Vincent line, you're really going for the superstructure. Or those lightly armored tier 8 battleship targets, as an example. Like with Nebraska's, I've done 20k SAP salvos with Lepanto, or in Delaware's. So SAP is what you're going to be firing most of the time, but when you do get a really good full broadside target, then you like a battleship, you want to go for the armor piercing, because you can get citadels on lightly armored targets, something like Minotaur, Austin, San Diego, and other cruisers in the game. You can definitely citadel with semi-armor piercing. The AP, as I just said, it's mostly for broadside battleships, or maybe even aircraft carriers, right? You have 12,000 maximum shell damage with velocity of 850 meters a second. So I find myself constantly switching between semi-armor piercing AP quite frequently throughout the game, although I'm shooting mostly SAP, but armor piercing when broadside targets on heavily armored targets present themselves. Depth charge airstrike, you get 2 flights, only 1 aircraft per flight, 2 bombs in the payload, 40,200 damage if you deal direct right on top of the sub damage. This does have 10-kilometer maximum range, which is nice. It would suck if this had like a 6 or 5-kilometer range, but you have 10-kilometer, which is good to have here on Lepanto. Consumable wise, damage control party, you have unlimited number of charges. Consumable action time 16.5 seconds because we built into it with our commander. Otherwise it'd be 15. Cooldown time 80 seconds. So standard damage control party you'd find on a Battleship tier 9. Repair party plus 379 HP per second. We can buff that up with the India Delta combat signal to plus 455. So if you're playing this in randoms and ranked, I would suggest running repair party. Action time 30.8 seconds because of, again, a commander perk we've taken. Otherwise it's going to be 28 seconds. Cooldown time 80 seconds, and we've built in to be able to have 5 of these. Now if I had any November Foxtrot, we could get that cooldown time down to like probably 76 seconds is what it would be if you want that. Then you have your exhaust smoke generator. Generates a smoke screen that reduces the risk of being detected by the enemy. So right now, with this combat signal, we've built into 49.5 seconds of action time. And then if you come into the last puff of your smoke screen, I do this sometimes, I stop in it, because then I still have like an additional 10 seconds of smoke concealment. If I'm comfortable and I don't need to keep running, kiting away or pushing into an enemy target, just add that additional concealed time. So that's nice to have. Action radius ½ kilometer, cooldown time 180 seconds. Again, we could take that November Foxtrot combat signal and we'd get it down to like 170 or maybe it's 160 something seconds. And we get 3 of them. For the last slot we have here, we have spotting aircraft, which is what I do recommend for you to run here in Lepanto. For those times, especially when you're playing at tier 10, maybe even the beginning of the battle, when ships aren't so close, or you finish up a flank and ships are further out from your 18.1 kilometer, you know, it's having a spotter aircraft, at least even if you fire at 20 kilometers away, you know all 12 of your guns are not going to hit, but maybe you get lucky 2-3 hit, and that's a little more damage, and otherwise you would have had to wait another minute or 2 before you got within that 18.1 kilometer range. And this also helps seeing enemy ships if you're having to kind of shoot a volley over an island. The spotting aircraft comes in handy. Action time 100 seconds, cooldown time 240 seconds, we get 4 consumables. Otherwise you have fighters, which they never prevent the first strike of a CV dropping you, because their action radius is 3 kilometers. So they get the first drop. This enemy CV will get a strike off on you, and then after the attack aircraft have flown over you, then do your fighters become engaged. So unless you're seeing this a lot of CV players, like, you know, weekends in randoms you see most CVs, then maybe you take fighter, but you also get a lot of passive players too on the weekends as well. I mean, you get it any day of the week, but it's maybe more so because the weekend players. So spotting aircraft is what I prefer to run. In terms of combat signals, a full setup I would run would be probably just this. If I'm feeling like I want the speed, if not, then this is the only combat signals I'm running. Alright, let's talk about Sansonetti. So he is a commander which you get from, what is it called, the Resolute Rapid Italian containers. They're like 6,000 a pop, so it's coal, so quite expensive to get. But now that I'm grinding and I'm playing a lot more of the Italian ships, he's been very much worth the investment. His talents consist of 3 things. First is rapid fire. Upon earning the Confederate achievement, your main battery reload time reduces by -15%, which is quite fun to have. Maybe you don't see so much Confederates with Lepanto, but you know, Napoli, Venezia, things like that, you will likely see that much more sooner. The second talent is the Far Reach talent. So it activates once per battle upon destroying an enemy ship. Main battery firing range plus 8%. I've liked having Sansonetti on this line because of that when you get a kill, and boosting our range up from that 18.1 kilometers, which is, you add basically 1.5 kilometers on. So if I just do the math, that takes you up to 19.6, or it might be technically 9.5 something. So 19.5 kilometers at tier 9 battleship in this game is a lot better than 18.1 when you are needing that range, right? So it's just a nice perk to have here on him. The other is the concealed reserves. So once you've hit enemy ships 100 times with your main battery shells, your action time will go up. So our damage control party, repair party, smoke in spotter plane, all those will be lengthened. So this is something you get much more frequently with cruisers, again, like Venezia, in particular Brindisi. He has, for battleships, he has just the one enhanced skill, which is the gun feeder. Main battery shell type switching time, negative 60%. I think, let's see, let me pull him off real quick. Recall commander. Oops. No. And then I want to see a normal Italian commander, which has had this guy. Here, negative 40%. What they have done with the Italian battleships, which I'm not seeing it represented in the... Let me switch to my other battleship. Well, he's got in yeah, negative 40%. What they've done with the Italian battleships is, because they have a longer reload time, they've actually baked in a reduction to the shell switching time. Not that I remember what it is off the top of my head, but it helps you out much more so. So like right now with the standard commander, we're 13.7. So if you, yeah, so 13.7, then you take Sansonetti, it's even better. But they've baked in a faster shell switching time here on the Italian battleships. They did that, I don't remember how long ago they did that, but it helps. So gun feeder is nice, and you've heard me already talk about it a couple times of why I like switching between semi-armor piercing and the armor piercing rather frequently here on the line. So let me just talk about a 10-point commander at first. So gun feeder is what I'd tell for 1-point skill. 3-point commander, I'm going to say grease the gears. To get that main battery traverse speed with the build I have, gets us under the 30 seconds to 28.7 seconds. 6-point skill, commander, I'm going to say adrenaline rush, because then your reload time is going to start going from 32.6 to 32, 31, 30, 29, 28 even, as you lose health, which for me is very helpful because this has a longer reload time on these main battery guns. And then for a 10-point commander, what I'm going to tell you to do first is go ahead and just pick up Fire Prevention Expert. You're going to see a lot more high explosive spam at the higher tiers of 8, 9, 10, and super ships. You know, Thunders, Conquerors, Smolensk, Gunboat, you know, Khabarovsk, things like that. You're going to see a lot more of the HE spam. So having Fire Prevention Experts kind of a must for sure, but you're definitely going to want it, I think, as your 10-point commander skill, so a 4-point skill here, because it reduces your catching fire by negative 10% and takes your maximum number of fires from negative 4 to 3. So without Fire Prevention Expert, you have 4 fires on your ship, 1 on the bow, 1 on the stern, and 2 on a superstructure. Fire Prevention, instead of having 2 fires on your superstructure, you only have 1 fire in your superstructure. And most HE spammers in the game are focusing your superstructure, so only having 1 fire tick for damage versus 2 is so much better, so you're not exhausting your repair parties and damage control parties as well. So that's what I would say as best for 10-point commander on the Lepanto. Now after this, for 14-point commander, it's really up to you. If you want to take Concealment Expert first, which is probably what I would recommend, so then you're down that 13.4 kilometer by sea, 10.4 kilometer by air. It's very helpful. Lepanto started feeling even more comfortable and more okay to play once I had Concealment Expert on it, versus what I had before, which you saw was that 12-point commander, and it didn't have Concealment Expert. So this is much more comfortable to play. Having Concealment, so probably for a 14-point skill, I would tell you to get Concealment Expert first, or your for first 14-point skill commander, you could be the Emergency Repair Expert. This increases the action time of your damage control party, so we went from 15 seconds to 16.5 seconds. We have unlimited number of damage control parties. Our repair party consumable action time goes from 28 seconds to 30.5 seconds. And the number of repair party consumables goes from or 4 to 5. So you're building into your survivability more, which is kind of what this line is about, because you're going for a pretty standard battleship build. 10-point, I'd say this, 14-point this, 18-point commander this, and then 21-point commander, last thing to say to top it off, would be the basics of survivability. Modular restoration time, -15%, fire extinction time, -15%, flooding recovery time, -15%. Just all in all, this is a really good standard battleship build to have on Lepanto. There's nothing exciting about Lepanto. You know, it's not a secondary battleship. You're not building into secondaries. You're not building into anything brawling. You're not a long-range snipe battleship, which there's not so much skills revolving around that. You don't have the best concealment, so you're not taking something like Brisk. I would say, in my opinion, yes, once you've activated your exhaust smoke generator, you go dark. You're not being hydroed, radared. You haven't fired your guns because they have a terrible gunfire penalty, smoke fire penalty. So I don't really would see myself running Brisk on Lepanto. It is something you could run. I'm just putting this out there as another option on the table. And then maybe you would be taking Emergency Repair Specialist, so your repair party and damage control party come off cooldown that much quicker. Other skills I might be open to on Lepanto. Well, the other one is, if you struggle with map awareness and situational awareness, then you probably want Priority Target, just so you're not pulling maneuvers and you're overextending yourself. You have, if there's 4 ships targeting you, then that's probably not the time to go broadside, as an example. Then it'd be something like this. But realistically, this would be your first bet. This is the number 1. Number 2, if you're really wanting that additional speed of maneuvering around the map when you're dark, but that's only when you're dark, and when you're dark. And then third is if you're just struggle with map awareness, and you're needing that party target to tell you how many ships are targeting you, then that might be something worth considering. Otherwise, just this is what I would say should probably be your first build option on Lepanto. Excuse me, so having some drainage from being sick from a cold. So that's going to wrap this video up. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you subscribe, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And again, we'll catch you on Twitch tonight, hopefully, if you're around. Otherwise, we're working towards 1,500 subscribers. So we're going to have a 1,500 subscriber celebration stream, a day on NA and a day on EU. So if you've not subscribed, I hope you do appreciate the videos and you would consider subscribing, because I try to base all my content on helping players in the game. So until next time, take care.